Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Mila and today I'm going to talk about political neurosis. I've been meaning to do this video for a really long time because I've been seeing more and more how, politics is just consuming us so much and has consumed a lot of people that I know. And, I was also at that end a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago. And especially because I'm Russian and, right now there's this whole thing going on with, Ukraine, Russia, then there's Israel, Palestine, and then there's, India, Pakistan, and who am I missing out on here? There's a lot of, there's lots of wars going on. And there's a lot of conflicts in the world. And there's a lot of, what's happening in US, there's political parties are fighting. And so there's always this kind of conflict and what I call division. And so I wanted to somehow psychoanalyze political neurosis and specifically explain to you why these people around you, maybe it could be your friends, it could be your family, they have been getting involved so much in this, and maybe you yourself is getting involved way too much in politics, even though you're not a politician, you're not studying politics. But for some reason, you've acclaimed yourself to be a politician. And I always say this to people that I know, that I have no clue about politics. I did not study politics, and I have no right to say about politics. Okay, I do not know a lot of things. There's something that I know is that a lot of wars, they happen because of money, or it's money because people sell, or not people. There's a sale of guns, and not specifically guns, what do you call it? Like military equipment. When it's being sold, it makes a lot of money. So essentially, I feel like we will never know the truth, and everyone has their own truth. And this is what really truly divides us. And so in this video, I'm going to analyze people who have fallen into the political neurosis, who have been consumed by it so much to the point that you might have, I've personally cut people off that has become too much, too intense, that has been pushing their opinions onto me, that has not been able to communicate with me without guilt tripping me into things. And so I thought, this is very interesting. I want to analyze this type of behavior, and I want to create this video. And so a few months ago, I sat down for maybe 7-8 hours and I started, dismantling everything. And so maybe it will help you in a way, because if you have proclaimed yourself to be a politician without a political degree or any experience, then that might be helpful to you, because you'll be able to understand certain things that's happening inside of you. You might be able to understand your friends, relatives, colleagues. And I know that this is something that people say, right? They say, do not talk about these three things. Don't talk about politics, religion, and money. So, well, today I'm going to talk about politics, but not in the sense of politics. I'm going to analyze it psychologically, and I'm going to analyze political neurosis. And to begin with, I think I need to start off by explaining what is political neurosis and what do I think is political neurosis. So let me read the definition of political neurosis real quick. It's when politics stops being a civic duty or healthy interest and becomes a psychological defense mechanism, a way to avoid unresolved inner conflict by projecting it onto the outside world. Instead of living your own life, a person, or their own life, the person becomes obsessed with fighting enemies, providing righteousness, and finding safety through group identity. And I'm going to talk about group identity. Political neurosis gives the illusion of control, order, and meaning, but at the cost of inner freedom. So if to really generalize it, I would say that this comes from emotional immaturity and victim mentality. But I do understand that these are very broad terms, and I can't just throw it at you and just be like, okay, that's it. It's victim mentality and immaturity. That's why people writing posts on Instagram. And this is real. I know it's happening. I know it's happening to a lot of people right now. Those people who constantly talk about politics, connect with people solely on the same political views, have constant conflicts with people who have different political views, try to constantly get people out on these political conversations, see things see political things and get triggered by it, and then, for instance, cut contact, right? So few things happened with me. I've had two friends that, to be honest, I cannot call friends, because I believe that, and this was some, and see, the thing is, I'm not black and white. I learned to stay in the gray. And so when I see conflict happening, I see the both pains. I see that both are hurting, and I see that both are in the wrong. You know how when two people have conflict, okay, usually both are in the wrong and both struggling and both are suffering. So I see it like that. I do not see as one is this and one is the other. Both are wrong, both are struggling, both are suffering. So I remember when I acknowledged someone's suffering, I remember mine has tried to call me, and she said, started attacking me because I acknowledged someone else's suffering. I acknowledged someone else's suffering. You know how sometimes some victims, they become unseen. You know, media likes to talk about one side and not the other. And so I acknowledged it. And that created like this rage in her. And it's honestly, let's talk about this, okay? Let's talk about this because this is interesting. And in addition to this, I've just realized how like politics and people around me are so into politics. And I've been living in Georgia for the past 2 months. And let me remind you, I'm Russian, and I've seen, you know, hate towards me. I've had amazing experiences. I've had great experiences, great people, lovely people. But then I've also seen the other side. And there's always one thing that I see with these people, is that they only see one side of the picture. They can never see two sides. It's always them against the others. It's never, see, the whole point of this video will be to explain to you that politics create division, and why staying in neutrality and being neutral, unless you're going to war, unless you in the army, okay, unless these things, you can't really do much, you know. There's a sense of powerlessness, like helplessness, that can arise from that when you identify too much with one of the sides, okay? When you identify with one of those sides, and then automatically, because both are suffering in the conflict, there's that helplessness. And you in general, you cannot help unless, I swear to God, there's so many people I know that scream and shout about politics on social media to the people they know. But guess what? They will never, these people will never go and fight for the cause. Actually go and fight for the cause. Never. They won't even do anything about the cause. They just talk about it. They won't actually do a single thing about the cause. Or they think that them talking about it already creates change, but unfortunately it does not. We might say that talking about it creates change, but it's the action that creates change. It's not talking about it that creates the change. Doing something might possibly create a change. So let's go into it now. Okay, guys, so the first one is projection. And what I mean the first one, I'm going to tell you the reason why people, some people that you know, or someone that you know might have political neurosis. So I call it. And what are the signs? So projection, as we all know, as you already know, if you're watching this, you probably know what projection is. It's, you know, it's taking feelings you don't want to admit that you have. It could be anger, fear, guilt, envy, and you say that belongs to them. It's not mine. Okay, simple as that. So, for instance, a lot of people have aggression, passive. Autoaggression, well, the aggression that they cannot let out. They cannot let it out. They can't let out their aggression. They store their aggression inside. Why? Where does this aggression come from? It comes from inner conflict. They possibly have some type of inner conflict. And so, in fact, a lot of people, I including myself back in the past, my aggression was suppressed. But aggression is actually a very healthy emotion, and if you know how to let it out in like a morally good way, in a healthy way, that can help you resolve your inner conflicts. But what some people do instead, they could call the other person, the other side, that they are violent, they are the problem, instead of admitting to the fact that they feel aggressive, like they want to show aggression, because there is so much aggression when it comes to politics with people who have very strong opinions, strong views about politics. That kind of like aggression, it comes up, and if you're not in touch with your own aggression, if you, like I said, you have some conflict, it's going to come out like you might become very aggressive. You might become passive aggressive. So immature, so very immature. Unfortunately, it's like, it's so sad seeing people, who are like older than 30 years old act like that. And it's very saddening. But anyhow, so that aggression, they're not in touch with their aggression. And so it's easier for them to call someone else an aggressor. Or passive aggression, they could act passive aggressively, or very aggressively, verbally aggressive, can become verbally aggressive. Why do people use it? I remember I sensed also in myself, when, I think that was 4 years ago, I sensed it in myself when, Russians were called the bad guy, and like there was so much hate going towards Russians, and I mean, it's still really happening, but anyhow, I started feeling that aggression, because it was like, I'm not the bad guy. I'm not bad. Like, why are you? Do you know what I mean? Like, what we start doing sometimes happens a lot in social media, where you talk about a certain political view, right? And then people are able to quickly either identify with it, or some people think that, like, if you have this political view, first of all, I would not suggest no one, including myself, ever to mention politics, talk about politics, and say anything on social media, because this is what happens. This is exactly what happens, is that person, let's say you write something about something political. Don't do it, but I mean, it's up to you. But I would say don't do it to avoid trouble, because people are not very self-aware. And so the other person sees it as an attack on themselves, because the person identifies with it. Because if that view is not the same as that person's view, they will see it as a threat, because they have completely merged and identified with a certain political, I don't know, party or view or whatever. You get what I mean, right? A side. Let's call it a side, okay? And so another view would be like a red flag in front of the bull. It would be like that. They do not have self-awareness to not be able to separate the human from the view, okay? Because that a certain political view, political side, some people think like that it's all about it that you support, but you might not, right? So anyhow, just like religion, my head is hurting. Just like religion, politics, to be honest, same thing really, politics, religion. I see people who have no sense of purpose, who have no sense of direction in life, often choose politics or religion, and they go deep into it. And they identify with it so much to the point that it becomes a part of their identity, because they have not figured out who they are and what they want from life, and who are they, what they like, what their values are. It's so much easier to identify with something, to latch onto something. It's easier because we all seek, I believe it's one of the hardest things in life to be able to identify who you are and what you want. It's one of the hardest, I'd say, hardest things in life. If you're not connected to yourself, it's very difficult. If you have a lot of internal conflicts and you have defense mechanism on top of defense mechanism, that it's going to be impossible for you to understand, who you are and what you want and where you're going in that sense. Another thing is, you need to understand that this is simplification. It's black and white thinking. Black and white thinking, it's a part of a borderline psyche structure when you think black and white. Because why? It's too difficult to see the other side. It's too difficult to be in the gray area. It's so much more simple to label something, to generalize as well. It's so very simple to generalize. And I had a friend who always used to sort of like highlight to me when I was generalizing, and I'm very grateful to her, because every time I say everything or everyone, I stop myself and I tell myself, no, not everything and not everyone, because not everything and not everyone. Simple as that. So generalizing, it's so easy for the psyche. It's so easy because it's a belief. Let me take a belief that is completely different from this, okay, from politics. I'm going to say, let's say, all women, I don't know, all men are cheaters or all women are cheaters, okay? See, that's generalization. You're generalizing something. When you have a belief, when something happened to you, when, let's say, a woman cheated on you, you're a man, a woman cheated on you multiple times, and now you think, now it's just so much easier to think that all women are cheaters, or it's, for a woman, it's so much easier to say all men are going to cheat anyway. Why is it easier? Because it's more predictable, because because if you do change your mind and you say, okay, wait a second, actually not everyone, then you would have to deal with uncertainty and saying all men are cheaters, all women are cheaters. That kind of like you're giving yourself fake certainty, like uncertainty equals safety. And safety equals, I'm not sure what safety equals. Anyhow, you got my point, right? So it's very easy. It's easy to say, oh, that side is bad. But how often also, how much time do we spend actually trying to figure out the other side, trying to understand the other side? How many... We're being fed news depending on our political views. That's what we're being fed. Not many people are willing to go and dig and understand the other side of the story. And to be honest, I agree with that. In some situations, I had, some of my friends actually said to me, hey, you know what? There is that thing you can watch. And that will give you an idea of the other side of the story. And I thought to myself, this is great. That's something I should watch. But because I sometimes choose not to watch it, I choose not to go engage and understand the other side. Therefore, I shut my mouth and I do not talk about it. Because you know why? Because I did not go and do my research about the other side. Okay, so anyhow, it feels safer to identify with something, some political views, political parties. Sometimes it feels safer because when you do, another thing is, it's not just when you identify with a side, then you also identify with a certain group of people and you put yourself in a certain group of people. And sometimes that group of people can become your life in a way. Identity, it's your identity. But going back to the first point on projection, so many people cannot accept aggressiveness inside of them. They would rather project it onto other people and say they are aggressive, you are aggressive, someone else is aggressive. So it's too painful for them to accept that they are being an aggressor, because that means they are bad. They think, if I accept I'm an aggressor, then I'm a bad person, and that is painful. That's painful for the psyche. So projection is one of the reasons why political neurosis happens. And another thing is, have you ever tried, and if you have not tried, you're watching this video maybe because you can relate to this problem, to this issue. Have you ever tried to be neutral? Have you ever thought what it's like to be neutral and not just be neutral? Have you ever thought about, because I have friends from all over the world. Okay, I lived in Dubai for 3-4 years. I lived in Dubai you have, Palestinians, you have Israelis there. I lived in Australia where I have Israeli friends. I lived in Russia where I have, Russian friends. I lived in Dubai where I had Ukrainian friends, and I lived in, do you get what I mean? So when I understood that I had certain parts of this political neurosis 4 years ago, I would go and converse with all my different friends, and I would hear their opinion. And I And it's always very interesting to see what they have to say, because everyone always has to say something. But what's more interesting is that I feel like a lot of beliefs are being taken from the media. And that's very sad, because most beliefs are being taken from the media, not history books, not studying history thoroughly, not going and spending hours really doing your research. They take something from the media, they identify with it because it's easy, it's quick, everyone wants to be accepted, right? Everyone wants to find their crowd. So that's sort of like part of the reason why this occurs, because sometimes people can feel lonely, and becoming a part of a group can be very soothing and very comforting. And that's okay, as long as, you understand why it's happening. Okay, guys, so two more things and I'm going to conclude this. Two more defense mechanisms that contribute to political neurosis is overinvestment and displacement. So let me go into overinvestment. What does that even mean? What am I talking about? So it's essentially giving too much emotional weight to politics, as if your entire survival or self-worth depends on the outcome. So for instance, you know how sometimes you see football fans or like political party political party people, supporters, when they lose or when they win, they celebrate it as their own achievement. Not something that's external, something that's almost like internal, because they've identified with it. Their self-worth is now attached. Once you identify with it, it's like your self-worth comes from that external thing. It's like external validation, because your sense of self is not strong enough. You cannot rely on yourself. You do not have a strong stability, strong emotional ground. And so therefore, you need an external party to feel, like you depend on it. Yes, you might argue this and you might say, okay, I know people who are very, self-sufficient, they self-reliant, they have jobs, they have clinics. I know people who are very successful, yet very, political. I think that also includes power in a way. There's like a sense of power, because especially for men, I think less for women, when you're strongly attached to like a certain political party and it wins, it's almost like you regain that power. It's an ego thing. It's an ego trip. Maybe you lack power, even though you could be having businesses, you could be a business owner, you could be whatever successful, but you might have this inner like urge, inner desire for power. And a lot of people desire power. Power is very delicious for our ego. And so when that political party wins, or whatever wins, something good happens, it's almost like you have this, you're power tripping, it's almost like you won. It's not just the political party or a country or whatever. It's like you are winning. You won. You get it? You do get what I mean? So, but then what's on the other hand? What's on the other side? On the other side is that if you lose, if your political party, country, what else? If they lose, then it will be reflected on you. It's almost like you're losing too. And people can go into depression, can develop severe anxiety. Their relationships might be ruined. It will affect their work-life balance, because that still has been attached. That sense of self-worth is still attached to that political thing. And therefore, it's like you lost. It's like you have lost. You have failed. And that can be very painful. So why do people use this specific over investment? Why do they use this defense mechanism? They might not have much going on in their personal life. The personal life can be, or maybe some person has built businesses, very successful, but not much excitement going on. Everything is very calm. A part of that person demands some kind of action, some kind of excitement. You know what I mean? And might be starting to feel somewhat unfulfilled, even though the person can be very fulfilled. See, when I talk about it, it doesn't always mean that, you know, these are very unfulfilled people. No, sorry. Like, you know, people who have not achieved much. There could be people who have achieved a lot could also have political neurosis too. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to explain. But that does not mean, if they have achieved a lot, it does not mean that it rids them. And I will keep repeating that again and again and again, that no matter how much money you have got, look at Elon Musk, no matter how much money you've got, you will have psychological problems. You will. It's inevitable. In fact, the more money, the more power, the worse it might get. Or let's say the person might not be feeling validated enough in their relationships. Again, the self-worth is very shaky. The self-worth is so you can't get validation from relationships. You're not skilled enough to build healthy relationships. You will then go onto politics, and then that way you'll feel validated, or through the group circle you'll feel validated, or through building a relationship with a person who shares the same political beliefs, you will feel validated. But that's easy, you know? That's like an easy way out from your internal conflict. The most difficult part is to understand that, okay, my self-worth is on the floor and I need to do something about me. Me is who I need to take care of. Not care about what's happening in the world. It's me who I need to first, you know, work on and regain that sense of responsibility and agency, and then go and vote and do whatever things you want to do. Additionally, I feel like political neurosis creates a cycle of helplessness. Why? Because people enter it feeling like they will, it's like a false sense of control, and so they feel like they will regain control of their life in a way, because maybe they don't have certain control over their life. But what happens in politics, it's always like up and down, right? So in turn, that could potentially create even more helplessness. So it kind of like one and the other, it locks, and it is just pure helplessness. And what comes from helplessness? Anger, aggression, or, you know, anger, aggression, that's more like libido, I guess, and martyrio is like death. So you either go like, there's either anger or there's either complete despair. So someone with no stable sense of self might say after an election, for instance, I cannot go on anymore, my country is destroyed, my life has no meaning now, and that would be despair. That's what I'm talking about. There's aggression, and there is despair. So that's despair, because their personal survival is hooked on external outcomes, external political outcomes. So overinvestment is about your ego. It's the ego survival, ego boosting. So see, instead of building like a very strong sense of self, and like I said previously, working on yourself, it's just so much easier. It's so much easier to outsource it into religion, politics, something else, drugs. And I don't even know what's worse, to be honest. I don't know what's worse. What's better? Maybe religion, but that's a whole different story. I'm not gonna talk about it now. And especially that could offend easily people. So that's a very touchy subject. And I know that the subject that I'm talking about right now is very touchy and very controversial. But what is the most controversial thing about what I want to say? But let me finish first about displacement. I don't think I've mentioned displacement, have I? I've mentioned overinvestment, projection, yeah. Okay, displacement. And after displacement, I want to talk about neutrality and how do we get out of it? And being neutral. Is it okay or is it not? And I know a lot of people will say, no, what do you mean be neutral? My whole country depends on this, or, you know, or that. How can I be neutral if my country is in war? How can I be neutral if something like that? But what's funny is that most of the time, political neurosis, I see people with political neurosis are the people who don't even live in the countries where there's war. Yeah, right? I mean, that's what happens. People, if you look into it, that's literally what happens. I would never, you know, like if someone is living in the country where the war is happening, and I've spoken to people living in countries where war is happening, and you'd be surprised how much more somehow stable they are. A lot of people decide to like leave their countries where the war is happening because they no longer feel safe, and some people leave countries and then they feel this sense of regret and an anger that their life has changed. And some people, they take it as an opportunity. Again, it depends what kind of mindset you have. You can have a mindset of this, Eric Byrne, the games people play, but there's another guy who talks about whether you have like a winner or loser mindset, basically, right? You can take a look at the situation very differently. You can look at it as this has been a gift from God, or this has been like the worst thing that could have happened to you. You can look at situation from different angles, and it depends. It's up to you how you decide to look at it and how you choose to live your life. Do you want to live in despair, or do you want to live in hope and create new opportunities for yourself, right? Again, I'm touching very sensitive grounds, I understand, but this is really my goal, is to explain that this, political neurosis, it creates separation. The more people talk in social media, the more people fight, the more people are, arguing and just throwing shit at one another. The more that happens, the more divided we are as a whole. But what we keep forgetting is that we're all humans. Let it be, I don't know, Ukrainians or Russians, Israelis, Palestinians, Indians, Pakistanis, American Liberal Party or whatever party. We are all humans. We all have, a soul. We all want to be happy. We all want to be, right? Like what saddens me so much is that there's just politics create so much division, even though we as humans, we really want very similar things. We genuinely we all want the same. We all want love and peace and, beauty in the world, to see the beauty in the world. Don't we want the world which is not violent, which is peaceful? Isn't that what we all want, right? And I feel like sometimes people's energies, like the more you invest into something, like you're giving your energy. If you have this kind of like condition, okay, I don't know if I should call it a condition, but if you have political neurosis, you might be, in the end of the day, you are investing your energy, the energy that you could have spent on something so beautiful, something like a really good cause, or just being kind to someone, or just doing something nice, doing something good, instead of fighting. And you can never win, because truth is hidden. Everyone has different truths. No matter how much you try to bring the truth, people will fix it. People will coerce it. Coercion? What's the word? They'll change it. They'll mask it. The truth will never. We're all fighting for the truth in a way, right? But I feel like it's disguised as we're fighting for the truth, but it's disguised as something else. I'm losing my train of thought right now. I think my brain is freezing. Or boiling. Okay, displacement. One more thing. And by the way, don't forget to comment. Of course, I feel like if people will actually watch this video, there'll be a lot of criticism and comments and just people throwing shit. And this is the last thing I want, because what I'm trying to say is that we need to be united. We gotta be united. There's no point in fighting. There's no point in really, some people say, what are you talking about? I'm here fighting for justice. But then I have something to tell you. It's like, aren't we all fighting for justice? See, sometimes we fight for justice because it feels so much safer than facing your inner conflicts, your inner demons. And there are different ways you can fight for justice. You can actually do something, an action, rather than just talking about it and creating conflicts. And there's also ways of doing that without causing conflict. You can still fight for justice. You can translate that justice peacefully. You don't necessarily have to. Usually we fight for justice. There's a lot of anger and resentment, when that could be in turn communicated in a very different, peaceful manner. Don't you realize how a lot of people with political neurosis, they're always triggered by anything, and that it speaks volumes, because they do not understand how to communicate like peacefully, because there is so much triggers there. So it's like, do you fight for justice from a place of like, I don't know, peace, clarity, or do you fight for justice from a place of unresolved rage? Because when you fight for justice from, your unresolved rage, then you will end up dehumanizing the other person, the other party, the other side. And dehumanizing, it's like not seeing the person, not seeing that there isn't actually a soul, a human being. You objectify another person because it's easier. You know, I think I have my own set of triggers, and my own set of triggers is that it's just so tiring. It's so tiring seeing all these conflicts, people raging, people being victims. It's so tiring seeing that people don't want to work on themselves. People will always somehow outsource it. So I do believe that politics can become a mask for personal trauma. But that, I feel like this video has been very long, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to now talk a little bit about neutrality and what that means, and how can you be neutral. Like, Mila, what are you talking about? How can you possibly be neutral when there's, you know, children are dying and people are dying, and you know, and there's gun violence, or there's this or there's that? How can you be neutral? Like, are you insane? Again, I have an answer. So people might think, right, if you're neutral, that means you're siding with an aggressor, oppressor. But neutrality does not mean apathy. Neutrality means refusing to fuel hatred and division and dehumanization. I'm talking about psychological neutrality. I'm not talking about political neutrality. However, I would promote political neutrality too, because again, wars are all about money. It's all about money. Sometimes there are some things that cannot be changed. However, again, when did we decide that? When did we actually decide that governments are stronger than humans? I don't know, but still. Now I'm going into like the whole subject of like responsibility and being like a responsible human. But see, I guess for me it's easy to be politically neutral because I don't really live anywhere. Like, I move around every 2-3 months. So politics, even though it affects me, but it doesn't bother me because it has nothing to do with me. It's not my problem, really not my problem. Maybe if I was living somewhere for a long time, I would see it as like, okay, I need to do something. I'm a responsible citizen. I have to do something. I need to make a change. But again, if that was the situation, there's always a different way to make a change, not through rage, but through peace. Even though peace might not necessarily win, right? But it's just safer. It's like psychologically safer for you to just, you know, pay attention to your life, to your own life. How can you win? How can you succeed? How can you find a country where you're most comfortable and suitable, that's suitable for you, most comfortable for you, safest for you? That's why people relocate so much. That's why people are moving countries left and right these days. Because I feel like people are taking responsibility. They don't like living somewhere, they move. Simple. That's how I see it. It's very simple. You don't like living somewhere, you don't like the politics, you get out of there. And let them deal with it. Maybe because I've traveled my whole life since age of, you know, I've relocated to Japan when I was a child. I was raised in Japan, and then I lived in Australia, then I lived in Dubai, then I lived in Bali. Like, it's always, I don't know, it's been, I feel like for me, it's just so easy to relocate if I don't like something. But then again, in a way, that's also can be considered as running away and escape. That can be a possibility. And I feel like, honestly, after traveling so much to many different places, I feel like, is there a good place? Like, is there a really good place to live where there's like nothing crazy is happening? Because right now I feel like the world is absolutely going crazy. And you really need to be able, especially in the time and day right now, you have to be able to have that stable sense of self so you can live through and survive that uncertainty, that all that, I'm sorry to say, this shit coming your way, like on media and people, and it's a lot to deal with. So I feel like now, these days, like now, it's time to work on yourself so you can process everything, you know, so you can have a peaceful life, so that outside world does not really affect you so much to the point that you go mental, you know. Find a hobby, find something you like doing, try to progress in it, keep doing it, and hopefully you can make a change in the world, in that way, you know. Like, also you need to understand that you're going against systems. If we take, let's say, again, I didn't want to bring any examples, but let's say if we take Navalny, and you know, like, you're going against systems that are, I have heard from my mentor. I'd say my mentor. Well, I'd just say someone I used to know, okay? Someone I used to know, and that was an interesting individual. And you know what she said? She said she was into esoterics. And she said that there are some people who come to this planet specifically to fight in a war, to participate in a war. That's their experience in life, to participate in conflict, in war, in crime or whatever. So I feel like it's up to you what path you choose. I guess this is more about, you know, not fighting with one another, and if you really want to make a change, then go fight in a war. Go fight in a war, go against the government, create some kind of, I don't know, group, try to do something, you know, like instead of being, what I call it, a sofa critic. You know, the sofa critic. It's the person who sits on the sofa and critiques the whole world. Instead of doing that, do something. Get out there. Like I said, I met a lot of people who live in completely different countries, and so they fight for, you know, for the country. Let's say I'm Russian, okay? Let's say I'm Russian, and let's imagine that I'm like not happy with something in Russia. You know, if that's the case, then I'd go to war, you know, if like I'm really like not happy, or like if, let's say I'm not happy about the government, then I'll go and become a politician. I'll go and become a politician. I'll study politics. I'll go into politics. I'll do something. But what I see these days is people who have zero knowledge about politics, living in a completely different country that's not affected, and talking, thinking they will change something, but it's not going to change anything. You're only creating a very toxic environment around yourself, around, you know, for the people around you and for yourself. You're hurting yourself. And that's what's upsetting, that people don't see that. People don't see that they're actually hurting themselves when their life could be free of that. If they put their resources into something else, they could actually do really well in life. They could be happy. But that doesn't happen because people don't want to work on themselves. That's and that's what creates dehumanization, segregation, separation, right? Honestly, I wanted to say a lot of more things that I think needs to be said, but I'm tired and I'm done. So anyhow, thank you guys for watching. If you actually watched till the end, great. Let me know in the comments what you think. Feel free to follow, subscribe, comment, like my video, come to therapy, buy my courses. I have an online course. It's about showing boldly online and really becoming yourself and becoming connected, becoming true to yourself and connected to who you are. Because I feel like that's my purpose. My purpose is helping people unmask all these defense mechanisms, you know, come close to home, come home to your real self. Understand what you want, where you're going, who you are, in order to just, you know, because being yourself is the ultimate joy in life. You know, and if you were truly who you were, then the world would be a better place. All right, so thank you guys for watching.